and hear your word. And may we listen with understanding and receive it with faith. Amen. Amen. Many of you know that I'm a keen gardener. And as well as trying to keep my own garden going, or our own garden going, I'm also a volunteer gardener at Treetops Hospice in Risley. I love the volunteering, but as all gardeners know, this time of year is without doubt a really busy time, because there are just so many gardening jobs all vying for immediate attention. At Treetops, the list is endless. Emptying the compost bins ready to mulch the borders after we've cut back last year's perennials, tidying up all the flower beds, pruning the rose bushes. Soon the thousands of daffodils will need deadheading. The pond needs a good spring clean, and the greenhouse is filling up day by day with lots and lots of trays of newly planted seeds. But only a very few weeks ago, the grounds at Treetops looked bare. The borders seemed empty, apart from some frosted blackened leaves. There were no signs of daffodils, just a few brave snowdrop shoots poking through the leaves in the woodland areas. Then, as if by magic, but of course it is the wonderful cycle of nature, that after so many weeks of the grounds looking totally empty and dead, the grounds have literally sprung into new life. The bare branches of the cherry trees are now full of the most beautiful pink blossom. The grounds are a riot of yellow from the thousands of daffodils. And there are lots of tiny green shoots in the trays of compost, the very beginnings of wildflowers, tomatoes, and colourful annuals. And so today, as we look at this reading, we see Jesus using a very similar image of how a seed of wheat must first die before it can then burst into life and produce many seeds. Jesus is, of course, using this image of death and new life to try and explain to his listeners of how his impending death and rising again will take place. But first, let's set the scene. 2 weeks ago, when Phil spoke about Jesus, the resurrection and the life, the Bible reading finished at the end of chapter 11. But today we seem to have fast-forwarded to partway through chapter 12. We perhaps appear to have skipped over Jesus' journey to Jerusalem. But don't worry, we're not ignoring that great event, as James will be speaking about that next week on Palm Sunday, the day in the church calendar, of course, when we recall this key event. So let's imagine the scene in our reading. It is by now early evening, and Jesus has just arrived in the city of Jerusalem. All along the road, the crowds were hailing him as a king. The city would have been incredibly busy, with everyone arriving to celebrate the great festival of the Passover. Jesus was no doubt tired, and together with some of his disciples, he was probably in the synagogue. The sight of all the crowd showed that Jesus' fame had spread far and wide, especially with the news that he could even bring people back from the dead. So perhaps it is no surprise that a delegation of Greeks, who according to John were also in Jerusalem for that great festival, were asking to speak with Jesus. John does not tell us whether Jesus grants their request, and instead immediately speaks of how he knows his time to die is very soon. The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Jesus is only too aware that there are indeed many who want to kill him, but he also knows his death is his glory, because he will bring new life. He knows that just as a single seed of wheat can produce a large harvest, so through his death too, he will produce a great harvest. For this very reason, he is willing to die. As one reads through John's Gospel, we seem to see Jesus literally zigzagging as he tries to dodge both those who want to crown him as king and those who want to kill him. After the feeding of the 5,000, the people wanted to crown him as king, but he hid and withdrew to a mountain by himself. Then after raising Lazarus from the dead, John described how Jesus escaped back into a region of wilderness with his disciples. And so when he next comes back into public view, he is hailed as king as he enters Jerusalem. It seems that for chapter after chapter, month after month, Jesus has been able to avoid a collision between those who want him as king and those who want to kill him. But Jesus' entry into Jerusalem is a signal that's all about to change. And the trigger that sets this into motion, John says, is when some Greeks come asking to speak to Jesus. These Greeks will have come from the other side of the empire. So this is definitely a signal of how far the word has spread. It seems that Jesus' fame of all that he's been doing in Galilee has become international news. So when these Greeks approach and ask to speak with him, Jesus instinctively knows that his first words to his disciples are, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified." Several times up to now in John's Gospel, Jesus has said that his hour has not yet come. But now Jesus is declaring, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. But instead of speaking like a king about his throne, his court, or his victories, he talks about his death. Jesus knows his hour is soon, that the hour of his death is coming. Jesus knows he has a choice to make. He can save his life, or he can be a saviour, but he cannot do both. And knowing his listeners will not understand, he uses the image of how a seed must first die before it can live on and produce many seeds. Jesus has declared his decision. He knows that he must die before he can burst into new life and produce a great harvest of believers. And as he speaks, Jesus is quite clear that he is ready to die, so that through his death he can bring new life to many. But 2,000 years ago, a sentence of death by crucifixion was considered to be so terrible that the Romans would never allow such a form of punishment to be handed down to a Roman citizen, no matter what crime they had committed. Yet here is Jesus, knowing exactly how he's going to die, but also knowing that his death is his glory. Jesus is preparing to face his hour of glory because he knows that through this death, he will bring life to many. And this includes you and me. But as Jesus contemplates his death, he appears to be troubled. "Now my soul is troubled," he says. As I thought about this verse, I seemed to glimpse, just for a moment, Jesus the human person. As for just a second, maybe he was contemplating opting out. "My soul is troubled. Should I ask God my Father to save me from this death?" He seems to be questioning, perhaps even doubting. What shall I say? "Father, save me from this hour?" But his answer is an immediate no. "No, it was for this very reason I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name." His reply is clear. "I know I must die. That is why I came. I came to die so that I can save many people." And Jesus says to God the Father, "Father, glorify your name." And God does, with a voice from heaven reply, "I have glorified it and will glorify it again." And John tells us that the crowd heard the reply, but while some heard it like thunder, others heard it like a voice of an angel. Jesus really wants the crowd to understand about his death, including the kind of death he was going to die. But it seems the crowd do not fully comprehend. So he says more to explain the kind of death he's going to have. "Now the prince of this world will be driven out, and I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself." By talking about lifting up, Jesus is using royal language to try and explain that he's about to ascend to the throne, that he's going to be higher, lifted up, exalted through his death, that he's going to be literally lifted up onto the cross as the people watch from below. John is once more wanting to point to the fact that the death of Jesus is the glory of Jesus, that the cross equals glory, because through the cross, Jesus will save all people, not just the Jews, but also Gentiles like the Greeks who have come to see him. But the crowd continue with yet more questioning. We have heard from the law that the Messiah will remain forever. So how can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man? And once again, Jesus tries to explain using an analogy, and this time about light and darkness, that they need to live in the light of Christ to see that his glory is his death. But if they continue to live in the darkness of unbelief, they will never see the true meaning of his death. And Jesus tried to show them that their darkness of unbelief was stopping them from walking in the light with him. I think Jesus must be exhausted by now. No wonder John tells us that Jesus left and hid himself from them. But perhaps he was hiding from the people because he recognised that these people were just too proud to recognise the true Jesus. I can almost feel the exasperation of Jesus as John writes, even after Jesus had performed so many signs in their presence, they still would not believe him. You can almost hear Jesus saying, for goodness sake, what more can I say or teach them to help them to fully believe? Jesus so wants them to fully recognise the reason for his dying, and I'm sure he's also sad at how their pride is blinding them and making them totally helpless and hopeless on their own. And so Jesus reminds us of how Isaiah, 700 years before, had so accurately predicted that the proud would never recognise Jesus, and how Isaiah had accurately predicted that many would still not believe despite all that Jesus had taught them. So a reminder of some words from that first reading from Isaiah, when he prophesied, he was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces, he was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. And so wonderful, assuring words from John when he wrote, Isaiah said this because he saw Jesus' glory and spoke about him. But it seems that although many believers did believe, they were just too scared to acknowledge their faith for fear of being thrown out of the synagogues by the Pharisees. How sad that the Pharisees were so close to knowing God, and yet it was their pride that was stopping them. It seems they loved human praise more than praise from God. And what of us? Are we sometimes too proud? Maybe pride is stopping us at times from truly following Christ. And what of us, following the pattern of Jesus as laid down in the last 6 verses of our reading? Are we really ready to give up our lives to follow him? Are we ready to be like that seed of wheat? As I finish, I offer a few lines from Tim Chester's book that he wrote. It's the Lent book that many of us are reading. Tim writes, if we give up our lives to him, if we die to self, then we'll produce a harvest. How will we fulfill the task of mission? How will we bring a great harvest of people to know and follow Jesus? By dying to self, laying to rest our own preferences and priorities and pleasures, and through resurrection power. And Tim goes on to challenge us. In what way is God calling you to die to self today? He says, embrace it, knowing that in the mission of God, death leads to life. And finish with a prayer that was on page 92 of the Lent book. O Lord Jesus Christ, who didst humble thyself to become man, and to be born into the world for our salvation, teach us the grace of humility. Root out of our hearts all pride and haughtiness. O so fashion us after thy holy likeness in this world, that in the world to come, so we may be made like unto thee, in thy eternal kingdom. Amen.
Amen.